fiscal this thing for local governments and judiciary and all that has to be a law. I'm for that. But I have gone beyond that to say, what investments are we making? All of us, civil society, media, donor, citizens generally, in terms of raising subnational conversations and put it on the front burner. These elections, the local government elections are the theater where our people should learn democracy through participation. So, but when we don't have opportunity to even express that, where people sit down and give themselves 99% of the votes cast in an election, it's you can't say you are learning anything from there.
Well, the other point, I don't know whether you want to respond to it. Professor Dakas was talking about some of the arguments that they have heard about why we shouldn't have state police, which also deals with the mechanics of resolving some of the knotty issues around state police. For instance, that state governments have challenges paying their workforce. Now you have a state police and you arm the state police and you're unable to pay them, these guys will be on the street. How would you respond to this? On the one hand, state governments are already making investments to the running of the federal police in their state, or the state commands in their state, which is under the federal authorities. Secondly, a number of states have created quasi-police organizations, even though they don't deal with some of the issues that we talk about. A number of traffic. Last month, for instance, in Lagos, Hisba in Kano, there are complaints about they are not being paid, but it will be a desire for those states that want to have their own police to have their police. And who says, is every policeman in Nigeria necessarily armed? And for those who are armed, how do you explain the Roja phenomenon?
So for me, is oversight. I've always been more interested in oversight. If citizens don't oversight anything, why wouldn't a governor pay salaries? Why? What's the argument? The argument for state creation, the argument, like we are doing, the argument that people put out when they want states created is that they can take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. They tell you, reel out all the mineral resources that are in their states and all the opportunities. All that is done. So as soon as you are elected, you abandon those things because there is no oversight, no engagement by citizens in terms of Zamfara, Arabian gum, all kinds of things, phosphate in Sokoto, all of those things. Nobody is interested. The federal government is not saying you can't generate those resources and pay your people. So is a function more of abandonment, citizen abandonment of their relationship with the state that plays out as if you permit my use of that word, the irresponsibility that we see, where people paying salary becomes an achievement. An achievement. There is something that is worrying about that. But you know that at the end of the day, security vote there is no issue where the security vote is not, we don't get it. It must be paid. And you hear the conflict that is happening in some states about, I didn't take my security vote, I should now be paid, all of those issues. So for me, more practically speaking, is to say, we need to be serious. The states that have already put up last man and the rest of them, they make them, what do you call it? They generate funds for them. The internal generated revenue. If the holes are plugged, the states should be able to take care of those issues. But the bigger fear is not whether somebody is armed or not. Like I said, it's about control. It's about that whole desirist attitude that, I'm in charge here, lock up people without due process, forget them in jail. You are controlling the judiciary, you are controlling the police, you are controlling the legislature. That will be absolute power. And we hear that absolute power corrupts absolutely. For the Attorney General issue, there is already positions on that. The Attorney General and Minister of Justice is not working for the president. He should work for the country. If you separate that office, one would be Minister of Justice, who is, the president's person. Then the Attorney General, the Federation, will be Attorney General of the Federation,
Chief Law Officer
Officer of the Federation. But what we have now is a mix of those two, and the conflict that we see in that is that there is a beholden. Somebody is more beholden to the appointer than to the Nigerian people who should serve, and that is the conflict that we're seeing.
And how the Attorney General will be appointed versus a minister or a commissioner of justice, because presumably what plays out at the federal level should also play out at the state level. And incidentally, Professor Dakas himself is a former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice. Professor Dakas, is it a linear perception to assume that mere separation of the two offices might cure the political interference that is often reported with regard to the roles of AG and Minister or Commissioner for Justice?
Thank you very much. As a former Attorney General of Plateau State, I actually was Attorney General. I left about 16 years ago. I have my personal views about this, but let me say that there is a proposal in the context of this constitutional amendment to separate the two offices. It has, at the level of the committee, now keep in mind that the National Assembly is actually still at the committee level. It has passed the committee level. It hopefully will be late before each chamber of the National Assembly in plenary, sometimes next week, because the idea is that before the end of the month, this gets transmitted to the states. So there is that proposal on the table to separate the Office of Attorney General from the Office of Minister or Commissioner. Now, it is interesting that a similar proposal actually passed both chambers of the National Assembly, was able to garner the required two-thirds concurrence from the states, and when this went to the president for presidential assent, this was one of the proposals that was rejected by the Jonathan administration, I think, at the time. But those who have pushed for this have predicated their argument on the need to ensure that that office is professionalized. It reduces partisanship and the risk of abuse. And I think those arguments are important. But I think it is also important to underscore the fact that the man makes the office in many cases. And as you rightly pointed out, you may have a situation where you separate the two offices. If you don't have individuals that have integrity and capacity, at the end of the day, you will not even achieve the results. So the recruitment process, the quality of the individuals that we recruit, the security of tenure, the independence of these individuals is also important. And under
Professor Dakas, we're running out of time. You know, there's never enough time to talk about and discuss constitutional review in Nigeria and matters arising. I'm sure we'll get to that some other time. Professor Dakas, can you hear me? Well, Professor Dakas C. Dakas, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and consultant to the National Assembly Constitutional Review Committee. He's a former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Plateau State, and also former Dean of Law, University of Jos. And also in our studio, Ezowan Wago, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms, and co-convener, Say No Campaign to Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your contribution on this show and your contribution to the conversation. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
We'll take our sports update now.
Nigeria's D Tigers beat Mali 73-69 on Sunday afternoon to qualify